So we're going to go to the draw class or the paddle class now, and we're going to just double check that our paddle does not leave the left side of the window and goes the other way, and that our paddle, the right side of the paddle, does not go past the canvas width. And when it does, it turns around and goes the other way, just like the ball does. So the paddle is bouncing around and the ball is bouncing around. If I run my program right now, I should see the ball is bouncing around as well as the paddle. So the paddle will go left and right. I'm not pressing any keys right now. The paddle is just moving on its own, so I can flip it back times. I guess this creates a pretty fun game as well, so it's pretty good so far. I like it. The next thing to do would be to um, have the ball not pass through the paddle like that. I do want the ball to bounce off the paddle, and that's going to require a couple of steps and a couple of key code, which I will help us figure out right now. So the first thing I want to do is make sure, so in my ball class, since my ball is going to be the one that is recognizing the paddle, I'm going to create a parameter here, a characteristic of the ball that recognizes the paddle is there. So I'm going to create a paddle attribute in one of the attributes for the ball. If I notice how canvas is an attribute, and I created a code that says self.canvas equals canvas. I want to do the same for paddle, so I'm going to say self.paddle equals paddle. This will sort of uh, the input. So we call these parameters inputs for the function. We're inputting a paddle into the ball. We're saying, hey ball, the paddle is here in the game, and I want you to recognize that it's here. And then I'm going to create a variable for paddle, which I will use later. So to explain this comment, it's just like what's saying up here, except instead of setting the object variable equal to canvas, we're going to say self canvas creates an object variable set to equal paddle. Okay, so after making the ball recognize that there is a paddle, we can actually use that as an identifier in our code. So another thing we need to do is to check. So we're actually checking for, just like the ball checks for the left and top, and all these variables here are checking that the ball doesn't go past the screen. We're going to say, hey ball, don't go past the paddle. If you encounter a paddle, don't go past it. Actually bounce off the paddle just like you would bounce off of the edge of the screen. Because this code is going to get long and I don't want to write a lot of if statements here, I already have 4. I don't want to write 4 more. I'm going to create a function called hit paddle, and I'm gonna tell the ball, hey ball, if you hit, that's what self stands for, by the way. If you hit the paddle, if you hit the paddle, and position of the ball will be one of the inputs. So we're saying, okay ball, check your position, and if your position hits the paddle, if this is true, if this is equal to true, which is one of the returns, one of the outputs that the function can say. So the function will either return false or true, and I can print those statements for you later to show you how that works. But we're saying, hey ball, check your position. If you hit the paddle and if this is true, you're going to take yourself in your Y position, your vertical up and down, and you're going to go towards the top of the screen again. So your Y, we're going to make the ball bounce up. So remember, negative Y values are up. This is saying if the hit paddle function returns true, view the block of code below. Otherwise, we're not going to run this block of code if we did not hit the paddle. So if hit paddle is false, the ball should keep going down, not bounce back up. Okay, so this is what this code is doing here. So now I have to create a definition and store it in memory, and I have to call it hit paddle, and it has to accept one of these POS positional arguments. So I'm going to copy this and create a definition above this draw function. So I created this in the draw function of the ball class. I'm going to create another function called hit paddle, and it's going to have a POS. So I need to call self. So this is saying that just came up. This is saying this is a method that belongs to the ball. So whenever I say hit paddle, I can use hit paddle for the ball as an object. So here's where it gets a little bit complicated, but I just want to say that our function only takes one input, POS, and it will return only one thing, that is return false. So by default, this function should return false, which means we never hit the paddle. The ball never hit the paddle. Otherwise, we want to create a couple of if statements, which will be our cases, which will check our cases. So the first thing I want to do is to since we have the position of the ball as POS, so I'm going to write a comment. POS is the position of the ball. I want to also create a paddle, and actually POS, the position of the ball, is an input variable. Remember, POS is getting the coordinates of the ball. So POS actually is a list of 4 numbers that I was explaining before. I also want to create a paddle POS, which will equal inside this function. It's going to ask for the same thing that this is asking for, the coordinates instead of the coordinates of the ID, which is the ball itself. We're going to ask, hey canvas, give us the coordinates of the paddle. So this is where that variable paddle comes in. We imported the paddle variable in the ball class right here, and we created the variable here. So we're saying, hey ball, make sure you know that there's a paddle, and now we're actually using the paddle, and we're asking, hey, give me the coordinates of the paddle in the game. So we can now have 2 lists, and we're comparing 2 lists. We're comparing the position of the ball, we're comparing the position of the paddle. So we need to check 4 cases. We need to check that, and I will write this in a comment. We need to check that the ball is between the paddle's boundaries, that's going to be this if statement. And then we're going to create another if statement to check. So the other if statement is going to be within this if statement. So it's going to be a nested if statement. We're going to check that the ball is close to or past the top of the paddle. So we want to check that. We want to make sure that we return the function true, that the ball hits the paddle only if the ball is between the paddle's boundaries and the ball is close or past the top of the paddle. So I'm going to have two if statements. And if all of these cases are true, then I want to return true. I want to return the function true. Okay, so this is the hard part where we have to actually understand the ball is between the paddle's boundaries. So we're going to first call the first number in the list. Remember, POS 0 tells me where the left side of the ball is. I want to say if the left side of the ball becomes less than or equal to the paddle position, and I want the right side of the paddle position, and that's going to be the number 2. So the third number in the list, 0, 1, 2, the third number in the list of the paddle is where the right side of the paddle is. So if the ball is less than, or the right side of the ball is to the left of the paddle, and the right side of the paddle of the ball, that's POS2, the right side of the ball, is greater than or equal to the left side of the paddle. So paddle POS 0, that's the left side of the paddle. So we're saying, ball, are you left of the right? Is your left side past the right side of the paddle, and is your right side to the right of the left side of the paddle? If so, we're going to return true. Now we want to check that the ball is close or past the top of the paddle. So we want to say is the bottom of the ball, which is POS 3, is that greater than or equal to the paddle's top? So paddle POS 1 is the paddle's top, and we want to do a backup statement that says, let's say, for example, the ball goes a little bit past the top of the paddle, or it reaches the bottom of the paddle due to like pixel specifics. I just want to say, hey ball, make sure your bottom is also, whenever your bottom is less than or equal to paddle position's bottom. That way, we're going to return true if the ball is found to be below the bottom of the paddle and above the top, or below the top of the paddle and above the bottom of the paddle. So this is below the top or greater than the top. Remember, y is up here is y0, and down here is y, however wide the canvas is. So this creates our 4 checks. Remember, an if statement usually ends with a colon. All if statements have to syntactically end with a colon. So I have 2 nested if statements. So I could also just combine these into 4 tests all in one line, but that's just